Hello and Happy New Year. This meeting of the Planning and Zoning Commission of January 3rd, 2024 will come to order. Pledge of allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call, please.
Chairman Richardson,
Here.
Vice Chairman Aton,
Here.
Secretary Grant,
Here.
Member Moscoso, Member Garrod,
Here.
Member Faison,
Here.
Member Perez,
Here.
Alternate Member Childs, Alternate Member Rogers, School Board Member Gilbert.
Here.
And I think alternate member Childs said something about today was his anniversary, as I recall. I saw it all over Facebook today. Approval of the minutes of December 6, 2023. I think you've had a chance to review them. Anyone want to make a motion?
Move to approve the minutes as presented.
Second. Second by member Perez. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Like sign? Okay, the minutes stand approved. There is some quasi-judicial, as I understand. You want to read those rules, please, the procedures?
Sure. Good evening. The notice provides that all persons who anticipate speaking on any public hearing item must fill out an oath card to be heard on that agenda item and sign the oath contained thereon. These cards are located on the table near the entrance to the council chamber or may be obtained from the recording secretary. This meeting will be conducted in accordance to the procedures adopted in Resolution Number 24-1997. Those speaking in favor of a request will be heard first, those opposed will be heard second, and those who wish to make a public comment on the item will speak third. The applicant may make a brief rebuttal if necessary. A representative from either side, for or against, may cross-examine a witness. Anyone who speaks is considered a witness. If you have photographs, sketches, or documents that you desire for the commission to consider, they must be submitted into evidence and will be retained by the city. Please submit such exhibits to the recording secretary.
Thank you, Chelsea. There's no old business, so number 9, new business. Eddie, do you think we should take them in this order, or should Tranquility go first?
If you'd like to do that, sure.
Okay. Anybody opposed to hearing the Tranquility Phase 2 final plat first? Okay. Well, there's 2 against 1. Okay, Eddie?
Actually, we'll let Christy present this item for you.
So Christy Anderson, Senior Planner. Tranquility Shores, formerly known as Antigua Bay, Phase 2 is a proposed 102-lot single-family subdivision on approximately 39 acres located north of State Road 405 and east of South Washington Avenue. This is the second phase of the overall project, which consists of approximately 345 acres. The City Council approved the original development agreement with master plan for the Antigua Bay project in 2017. The master plan includes single-family lots, multifamily, and commercially zoned property, and recreational amenities, including public boardwalks, walking trails, and open space. The following items have been attached in your packet and require approval and acceptance, including the final plat, covenants, performance bonds for required infrastructure and sidewalks, and public utility easement. The final plat is consistent with the comprehensive plan, the preliminary plat, and final plat requirements described in Chapter 34, Article 3, Division 5 plat of the Code. Staff has reviewed the final plat for consistency with the comprehensive plan, land development regulations, and recommends approval. Staff has also reviewed the covenants and performance bonds and recommends acceptance. I'd be happy to take any questions you have from staff.
Any questions of the staff? Any questions? Okay, I'll open the public hearing. And the cards? I assume we're pointing at Mr. Honeycutt.
Right on time.
Good evening, Rodney Hancock, 3700 South Washington Avenue. Rodney's microphone.
You just turned it off.
Testing, okay. Just to make sure. Good evening, Rodney Honeycutt, 3700 South Washington Avenue in Titusville. And so we've gone through the final engineering process, and it's all approved, and we have submitted the final plat, and it's approved by staff, and the covenants to add Phase 2 to the plat, and the performance bonds and the easements to the city. And so we're requesting approval tonight of Phase 2 of the plat. I'd be glad to try to answer any questions if you have.
Any questions from Mr. Honeycutt? Has there been any significant change since the original was?
So the only change that I can think of at all is there was an easement in Phase 1 plat for a water line to go out to US 1, and it followed a road, the proposed road. And when we went to DOT, they wanted that road, the first phase of that road, to be longer, just for traffic. And so we did make that, and so now that's all in Phase 2. If you were to have noticed that easement, we had to get an amendment to the plans for Phase 1 to move that, and now it's incorporated into Phase 2. But that's the only change.
Any questions of Mr. Honeycutt? Thank you.
Thank you.
Next card?
No more cards.
Okay. I'll close the public hearing. Any more questions of staff? Okay. Does anyone care to make a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve. the
Mr.
final
Grodd?
plat.
Is there a second to the motion?
I second.
Second by Member Faison. Any other questions? Roll call, please, Lori.
Member Garad,
Yes.
Vice Chairman Aton,
Yes.
Member Perez,
Yes.
Member Moscoso,
Yes.
Secretary Grant,
Yes.
Member Faison,
Yes.
Chairman Richardson.
Yes. Okay, we'll go back to item A, but first, how do I expand the printing on this? There isn't anything,
Right there. On the side. Way down there.
okay.
See it? Yeah, you make it small. There you go.
Okay.
See that hand on your upper left?
Yeah.
Oh, you got it.
Okay. Eddie, you want to present the item A?
Sure thing. Thank you, sir. Good evening, Commissioners. This is the Landscape Technical Manual Ordinance beginning on page 8 of 78. I'll read the second paragraph of the summary explanation. On October 25th, 2022, the City Council approved the Titusville Environmental Commission, TEC's, recommendation to replace the Landscaping Technical Manual tree list and consider the recommendation and provide direction on replacing the current tree list in the city's technical manual with the University of Florida IFAS Native Keystone Species List. Council directed staff to take the TEC's recommendation and incorporate into the current tree list in the city's technical manual. Council desired not to replace the current tree list in the city's technical manual, however, to incorporate the TEC's recommendation to modify the current tree list. On June 14th, 2023, the city's consultant, Kimley Horn, presented the updated landscape technical manual to the TEC, which the TEC approved the updated landscaping technical manual at that meeting. Thank you.
Any questions of the staff? Member Grodd?
A couple of questions, if I may. I had transmitted some
text through staff some concerns that I have, and I want to speak about those, but I wanted to make myself familiar with the background, and I apologize, I don't have a historical perspective. The current technical manuals being supplemented by the list that is included with the proposal, or is it deleting the list entirely and that the new list that's proposed, those species and trees are the only list?
Good question. So the way that you will see the strike through and underline, for example, on page, let's see, page 13, 14, it appears that the entire list is being stricken. And that's just a formatting. The information from that table is being carried over into this new table, and the different tree species are being updated. Some are being kept, some are being removed, and some are being added to as a more current, sorry, brain fog. Basically, to take a new look at the species that are provided in that list. And this, to give even more of a background, originally this came about with the removal of, there was a request to remove the Sylvester palm tree from this list. And so that was done immediately, but then that discussion carried over into a further discussion of when was the last time this tree list was updated, and maybe we need to take a better look at it. So the city hired a consultant to prepare this list, looking at IFAS and looking at the Central Florida Regional Tree Council, a number of different sources to prepare this list to provide an updated tree manual.
And with that question, I appreciate that answer. That's kind of what I thought I was seeing, that the total obliteration by strike-through is just a formatting error. And using an example out of that, for example, on the old list, it's struck through laurel oaks. I'm not a fan of a laurel oak, but it's struck through laurel oak, and the new list includes live oak but doesn't have a laurel oak. Would the summary be the laurel oak remains and it's just that format error, that live oak and laurel oak plus the other oaks that are listed in the new ordinance would be acceptable plantings?
So is your question, is the laurel oak included in the new list?
Just as one example, yes, it's strucken through, and I'm trying to determine, is it going to remain or is it not going to remain, as one example.
I do not see the laurel oak on, beginning on page 20 is the new
It's not on the
format.
list.
I
Correct.
don't see it listed.
So it's being stricken through on the old list, therefore it won't be a preferred planting species.
Correct.
And that kind of comes to the point I have, and I don't want to make this a difficult discussion. I myself would like to recommend that this matter be tabled, that the consultants who prepared this list be present so that we can ask at least my technical questions. The reason, and I don't know if all the members got the forwarding of that.
We did. We did.
The reason was, one thing just kind of jumped out at me, and I apologize. I've got a little experience in this, so I'm used to looking at these kinds of lists as I was once, like Eddie, a staff member. And seeing this listed Schumer to Oak, that struck me as odd for seeing projects approved, and as a staff member reviewing landscape lists, having to kind of pitch hit as a quasi-expert, I'd never run across that as a preferred species in Central Florida. So when I drilled down into it, I went to IFAS actually, and the range for that southern range is Marion County. With that said, there's other species that were in the list I prepared that I think it's fair to say the area of North Brevard, Titusville more specifically, as kind of a unique environment. You can see that on the range of tree plantings if you go to IFAS or any of the resources available. And there's almost an oddity. You see species that are covered north as well as south and west of this area of Brevard County, but when you get into this area of the Indian River Lagoon, the topography, the soil conditions, the climate, everything's a little different here. And when you look at these lists that are prepared, I see numerous examples where this list is providing for plantings that are on the very edge, if in fact they are within this area. And that's a difficulty to make the developer plant plants, hold them responsible, that the plants may not successfully establish themselves. And that is the crux of what I would like to table and get a better understanding from a technical standpoint. these listed plants, and the list I had was just combing through it as quickly as I could. I apologize, I was enjoying the New Year's, so I did the best I could. I believe there may be an answer. Maybe the answer is the climate of this area has changed and these species will thrive here. I had another one I found as an example that's actually a Virginia species. And when you look at the range, it goes down to southern Georgia. It doesn't even come into Florida. And that being said, that would be the purpose of my recommendation, to consider tabling this and bringing the experts in. And then a bookkeeping order, we noticed is that last page has a list of species, but the page before it has the row that says these are the unwanted species. And I first looked at it, I said, we're not planting Brazilian pepper
No.
trees. So I had that corrected, but I think repaginating the thing so that appears on the header of that page that these are the unwanted species. So with that statement and question, and I appreciate it, that would be at least what I would think would be beneficial for me, to hear more technical answers to questions.
Chairman, could I make a quick response?
Yes.
So just to add, so I did take a look at the trees that you provided in the list earlier today, and a number of the trees are not in our zone specifically. They're in adjacent zones so Titusville is in Zone 9B, or was in 9B. Now the USDA hardiness map is actually updated very recently. Now we're in 10A. And so a lot of these species may not be, the recommended range may not be specific for this region, but in a lot of cases, being one range over does not mean that the tree will not survive or thrive. It's just that's, and I prepared or I printed out, I should say, an explanation of the hardiness zones to help explain, because it's not common knowledge, so I just want to make sure that the commission's aware of what those zones mean or where they come from. The map is prepared by the USDA, and so it's the USDA plant hardiness map. And the way they describe the hardiness zones is that they should serve as general guides for growing perennial plants. They are based on the average lowest temperatures, not the lowest ever. Zones in this edition of the USDA are based on 1991 through 2020 weather data. This does not represent the coldest it has ever been or will ever be in an area, but it simply is the average lowest winter temperature for a given location for this area within a 30-year span. They go on to say that the microclimates, like you mentioned, being near the Indian River Lagoon, a body of water, may provide additional moisture in the air or hold better temperature, and so it addresses microclimates. It says microclimates, which are fine-scale climate variations, such as small-scale heat islands from blacktops and concretes, or cool spots from valleys, could impact what's suitable for a specific area. And so it's not to say that a specific tree absolutely cannot survive outside of its zone, but it's recommended for that area because of the likelihood of the coldest frost in that area, the coldest temperature, being too much to bear for that species.
And I appreciate the answer. That follows the suit I was trying to play, that there's certainly, and your expertise, I'm not doubting, I don't have expertise beyond some practical experience. My thought on this is, it seems to me that they have created a nice ornamental type of landscaping package. I was kind of surprised that in an area where water values are difficult and the sustaining of water in Titusville is difficult and reuse lines are not available citywide, and we're not growing that reuse line at a rate possibly as great as the growth. So we're planting trees and we're not providing water, and I was somewhat surprised that the list contained so many that were more ornamental by their nature and probably less drought tolerant, and salinity in the groundwater here much different than Central Florida. To just add a few more comments to my concerns, and the idea that you plant something on the edge of a zone or a transitional zone, it's like anything. If you're on the edge, your likelihood is going to at least be decreased that it's going to survive, as opposed to a tree species that's indigenous to this area, using a live oak as an example. I was even surprised at the list of pine trees they've placed in there. Just the comment about a northern slash pine in Central Florida that grows in Georgia all the way to Virginia and comes into Florida seemed to me an oddity. So With that, I'm sure that if the other members would agree that we could possibly allow the consultant to come forward and maybe rest me assured that I'm not voting on a list that's not the best list, and answer some technical questions on a future meeting, if that's possible.
Yes, let's proceed with the public hearing after Secretary Grant.
Well, I was going to, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was going to agree with Mr. Gerard. But I was looking at it like, has TEC had a chance to respond or to comment on the comments by the Mr. Begley from Development Services or the city arbitrist or something like that? I mean, it seems to me, to me, TEC is the main stakeholder when it comes to environment. And they should be the ones who have the last say on this, more or less, or at least predominantly. And if we start talking about changes being made to the ordinance, it should go back to TEC, in my opinion, to get their opinion on it as well. That's why I was going to suggest that we table it until TEC can maybe listen to what other people have to say, like Mr. Begley or the arborist, or who knows, you know?
Mr. Let's see, Member Moscoso.
Thank you. Yeah, I would actually agree with, sorry.
Somebody.
No, with all of you, actually, that we should table it. I think it needs to go back to TEC. I did speak with Kay St. Ange today to get her opinion because I feel like this is an area I'm knowledgeable on, and I know she has extensive knowledge on this. One thing I looked at it from a different perspective. I wanted to see what other cities were doing. And so instead of combing through the list, because I think that should go back to TEC, and I did email Mr. Parrish asking if we had an arborist on staff that would have gone through this and confirmed. And I don't want to steal your thunder because I know that you have a speech prepared, but one of the things that Ms. St. Ange mentioned to me is that even though we have a list of native and non-native, developers are not required to use that. And so I was looking at what other cities have done, and I came across this really good article. I'm going to pass it out, but it's called Sustainability or Sustainable City Code. And it just has some examples of what different cities have done. And a lot of it is they incentivize developers to use native plants and vegetation, or they require it. And I think right now Titusville is in an interesting time where we are developing quickly, and we have developers that want to develop here. And so I think this would be our chance, maybe not us specifically, but our chance to maybe kick it back to the TEC and ask for possibly, if a developer is going to be developing here, ask for a percentage of that to be native plants. I drive by Park Avenue. My kids go to school at Park Avenue, and I think it's called Huntington. It's a new development. They have clear cut all of the trees, and I actually just requested to see their landscape plan because I don't know, but I would love to know what percentage of landscape is going to be native. I looked at one that's a development by my house and looked at the landscape plan, and only 25% was native. And so possibly coming up with a percentage or some incentives. As you can see, some other counties, other cities have offered incentives to developers to do that. So I don't have the expertise, but that would be something I would like to consider in the future.
Member Perez.
Yeah, I'd like to add something to that as well. TEC has spent at this point probably a couple of years, okay, of these lists going back and forth, getting expert opinions and whatnot. And I agree, rather than us spending the time here, this is one area that, logically rests there.
I agree.
Alternate Member Rogers.
Well, just on a personal note, I don't mind losing a live oak as long as I get a crepe myrtle in its place. No, actually, I was just curious. The Brazilian pepper trees were mentioned, and I just wondered, just kind of idle curiosity, in the process of clearing and planting new trees and that sort of thing? Possibly this is on a state level and a county level, but do we have some kind of active policy going to take the invasive species out as development goes forward? Or is that just part of that process, or because it sure would be. Every time I see a Brazilian pepper tree, I grind my teeth. I can't believe that those idiots, I think in South Florida, started that.
So when an application for development is moving forward and they provide a tree survey of the property, if there's identified nuisance invasive species on the property, they're required to remove them. Chairman, it sounds like there's a lot of questions that the commission still has about the technical manual ordinance, and I'd like to ask if the commission could, maybe if staff were to write down some of these questions. We have a meeting scheduled with the arborist who prepared the draft that you're seeing tonight. We have a meeting with them tomorrow, and so maybe we could get you some answers, maybe even before the next meeting if you decide to table this.
Okay. Let's finish with Member Garrard, then we'll open for the public hearing.
I beg my pardon for not asking this question when I first addressed staff. The technical manual's listing, is there a component of that manual that gets into the planting schedule, bucket size, canopy, diameter, breast height? I don't see anything in the manual that dictates what size trees are planted or some value of trees, as you were indicating when you clear cut an area and you replant trees. Is that in a different part of the manual?
It is. So this is only about the recommended species. As far as mitigation, replanting, or payments into the landscape trust fund, for example, all of those are separate sections of the code.
Understood. Thank you.
Okay, at this point, we'll open the public hearing. Lori, do you have any cards?
Yes. Casey Nodge.
I figured.
Casey Nodge, Maryland Avenue, Titusville. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, too.
The Brevard Zoo just planted 100 native plants along a seawall at Sandpoint Park to demonstrate to residents an alternative to non-native plants adjacent to the lagoon. They want to show to residents that you don't need to plant sod, which requires fertilizer, all the way up to the lagoon. Instead, let's plant native plants. And they did a lot of research and came up with these 100 plants along the lagoon. It came from all the way from the zoo to help us with that endeavor. Then the Titusville tree team just planted 24 live oak trees at Sandpoint Park. We studied that live oak trees indeed would be able to manage, they are native trees obviously, and they're able to handle the salt spray and occasional inundation from brackish water. And so that's why we chose the live oak trees to be planted at Sandpoint Park. We also planted 115 native trees at Chain of Lakes Park. We did our research before we did that. The mayor, the vice mayor, and the city council member Nelson each enjoyed planting a tree at Sandpoint Park just a couple weeks ago, and we'll enjoy watching that native tree grow. These native trees will provide habitat for native birds and wildlife, shade our walking trails, and reduce polluted stormwater into the Indian River Lagoon. The landscape technical manual's list of recommended trees is just that, recommendations, and plants also for landscapers is approximately 2/3 non-native plants and only 1/3 native plants. I did a tally. I spent about an hour tallying that up. Native trees and plants support native insects and caterpillars, which support native birds. In fact, baby birds can't eat seeds. They only eat caterpillars and bugs. And so we have to have these native trees to support the native bugs that support our native birds. Nearly 30% of birds have vanished in the U.S. since 1970. I have been feeding birds all my life, and I get about a quarter of the birds come to my feeder than I used to, and I'm feeding them the same thing, and I didn't change the plants in my yard. Native plants support native pollinators, which are essential for food production. So unless we provide for those pollinators, native plants, our food production will decrease. Native trees and plants are adapted to our native soils and thus don't require fertilizers to thrive as do non-natives. Less fertilizers used result in less pollutants into the lagoon. Native trees and plants are adapted to our climate, the dry and the wet season.
Ms.
Can I,
St. Ange, do you need some more time?
just a little bit more?
Yes, I make a motion.
A minute or
Thank
two? Okay.
And so they need very little supplemental watering. Non-native trees bring disease to our native trees, such as the lethal bronzing disease, and there are at least 3 trees on that list still that can bring lethal bronzing disease to our sable palms. Due to development, hundreds of acres of native trees are being removed in Titusville, destroying bird and wildlife habitat, increasing our temperatures. I don't think I need to elaborate further on that, but might I suggest that you either table this or improve the ratio of native plants and trees on this list? Incentives could be provided to developers who choose native landscaping plants. Send this list back to the drawing board. It needs more work. I recommend denial. Thank you.
I recall in the redevelopment of Winn-Dixie on Harrison, you made the remark that the palms that they were planting, instead of, they were digging up the oaks, chopping them down.
Yes,
It was in regard to lethal bronzing.
yes.
But they took Peggy Busaka's word and they put those kind of palms in there. And I was just there today, and I don't know if that's lethal bronzing or what that's going on to those. And you see it down US 1, where US 1 and Hopkins split off. I keep watching those trees you talked
Yes.
about. You and
Yes.
Laura Lee Thompson.
Yes. So we don't need, it's just so obvious that native trees are the best thing for our native soils and for our native climate. There's all kinds of websites. For instance, this one here that tells you what insects and what birds are supported by each kind of native tree or plant. It's just, you could go on and on about the subject, and I definitely agree with Mr. Gerard. If there's not a laurel tree on that list, there's something wrong with that list. There's definitely places for laurels. Live oaks live longer, but laurels have their place as well, and they are throughout our woods. And so we definitely want to encourage the planting of native trees and plants. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Yes.
I have one question, Eddie, and I think it would be helpful if however long it takes to work through the list is what it is, but identifying those planting ranges, as I said, I went through and did some quick cut and paste to try to see that graphically, but if the consultants can be prepared to address that graphically, illustratively, showing the other members what you see when you see a range. And as I said, there was one, I can't remember which tree I saw. I think it may have been the northern slash pine. It struck me as odd that just as if an island existed here in Titusville, you can see this wedge of not in the zone, as you called it, zone 10 or 9 or 8, they're all numbered, but it literally scoots up from the St. Johns River and comes to an apex right here in Titusville. If you use that graphic illustration, you would clearly see that this tree, from that point north and west, it's a tree for planting. But here, it simply is not in that range according to the map from IFAS. So my question is, can the consultant who did this come prepared to illustrate what these ranges are, as opposed to getting into this diatribe of I saw the map and it looked like that. It's a mind's eye picture for me, and it's difficult for me to express it to other members or the public. What that looks like is a picture worth 1,000 words. And in each of the species, at least the ones I've provided in the list, I would certainly enjoy seeing them. And if I'm incorrect with what I pulled off the information resources I had, I stand corrected. But I really would like to share that with other members when they vote on this list, if they're going to do that, if that's possible.
Alternate Member Rogers.
Ms. St. Ange, I just wanted to thank you for your input on that. I have to say I'm embarrassed that I didn't know a lot of the information that you provided. But could you just repeat, what exactly was the ratio of native to non-native on this list?
About a third of the list is native. 2/3 is non-native,
Wow,
yes.
that's surprising.
And the Florida Native Plant Society has a great website, and you can look up lists all the plants of different kinds of plants and trees that are native to our zone, and it tells you all kinds of information about them. So if there's no reason why we should have a list that is 2/3 non-native. I don't.
I couldn't agree more, and I have to say, again, I feel a little embarrassed, but I had no idea about the importance of the caterpillars and the birds, and I think we're all aware of the disappearance of songbirds in the United States. But thank you for providing that information, and I think it's very important.
Thank you.
Member Moscoso.
Yeah, sorry, back to this document I gave, I thought one thing was quite interesting I wanted to point out, and sorry I didn't give you guys a copy, but I've got one. In Sanibel, Florida, they require new developments and redevelopments to have a minimum of 75% native vegetation to be used in all landscaping, with the remainder 25% restricted to only non-competing plant species. With this list, I agree that would be absolutely impossible to implement something like that. And my next question, do we have an arborist on staff?
Yes, we have two.
Okay. And did they have any input on this list
Yes.
as well? Okay.
Okay. Lori, are there any other cards?
No, sir.
Okay. Eddie has asked for any questions you want addressed between now and the next meeting. And I've heard a motion, not a motion, but an opportunity to table this. And I believe in Brad's emails, he said the person from Kimley Horn would be available the next meeting, I think.
We're working on the details to see if our funding that we've, for the contract, for the work that they've done, could include an additional meeting. So we're working on that. We'll have details.
Okay. So, Mr. Rogers.
Eddie, is there some way to incentivize the use? I mean, is that done anywhere? Or perhaps Member Moscoso has researched that, but I don't know, to encourage developers on a financial basis or some sort of I don't know what it would be, a credit towards, something, but to, the use of native plants?
Sure, yeah, an incentive program could definitely be developed. That's outside of the scope of what council has asked for at this point. They've only asked for updating the species that have been in the list, in the existing list. And so that would be a separate recommendation to council, is to include a incentive program for native species.
Well, I find it incomprehensible, really, that this list, isn't at least, 50%, native or 51% native. The fact that it's, just a third, I don't think that works.
Okay, what is the pleasure of the commission?
I certainly would like to make, and I'm saying the 17th because that was also in the correspondence from Mr. Parrish, if that's adequate time for you to ferret out if you have the money for the consultant or not, and then the two arborists come here. It may be more appropriate to take a little more time, give staff a little more opportunity than 2 weeks to try to find the money, so to speak. And if it would be appropriate, I'd like to recommend we pass this thing to the next month. Just give it a 30-day continuance, and we can address it at that time and give you staff ample opportunity to address the specific questions that I or other members have. So a recommendation is to continue it for the next month, in the month of February.
Is that a motion?
Yes.
Okay.
It's the first meeting in February.
Anybody wish to second that motion?
Second.
Okay. Does that give you sufficient time? And has this been advertised to come before council at a certain date?
So we do have it planned to go to council on January 9th.
January the 9th. That's next Tuesday, yeah.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I would personally prefer that TEC had a chance to also participate before it comes back to us.
There's a motion on the table.
And
We're
second,
having discussion,
Yeah,
right?
but you can't, a motion to table is not discussable. She's right.
okay, all right,
Roll call, please, Lori.
Secretary Grant,
yes,
Member Faison,
Yes.
Vice Chairman Aton,
Yes.
Member Garad,
Yes?
Member Perez,
Yes.
Member Moscoso,
Yes.
Chairman Richardson.
Yes. So the motion to table passes. Is it advertised that'll come before council next week?
Yes, it's been advertised.
Well, council can table it too. And I think some members, Member Perez said it needs to come before TEC again too. And I would think that the council would approve of that, going to TEC. So it may be 2 months before we get to act on it.
That, Mr. Chairman, that was the question I was going to ask with the idea of having to go back to TEC for further evaluation. It can be continued again to kind of let the cart catch up to the horse. And that way, if it's next month and we're here, and the second part of that was, is there a way that TEC could communicate if they're meeting between now and 30 days from now, that if they feel like they would like to have it, that could be a recommendation we receive to continue?
We've got a
further?
TEC member on P and Z.
So is there a meeting that could avail the members to convene and discuss this being moved forward to continue, and then perhaps continue it enough for we get with those folks at TEC and let them reevaluate? Or
Yeah,
look at it?
since P and Z is in the position that it's in, can we put it as part of the agenda for TEC for the next meeting?
So when city council reviews this item next week, they will receive your recommendation. They'll see that you've moved to table the item and that you're recommending that it go back to TEC. So city council at that point would have to decide that it should go back to TEC. And just as a reminder, the item was approved by TEC at the August 2022 meeting, it looks like, June of 2023. So the TEC has had a chance to review it, and they recommended approval. And so you're asking city council to send the item back to TEC to reconsider the item.
because of the recent comments from other individuals, I don't know if TC has had a chance to act on those or respond to those. That's my reasons for wanting to go back, because like, as I said, to me, TEC is the primary stakeholder when it comes to anything environmental. That's where it starts. I may be wrong. You can correct me if I'm wrong. I don't know. It won't hurt my feelings. But that's just the way I felt about that. So.
If I may add to the conversation, I am aware that Brad Parrish emailed the TEC Commission the same information that was presented to P&Z in the past 48 hours or so. Once that information was disseminated, TEC also received it. And this body may make a second motion on this item to ask council to send it to TEC. That would answer your question.
That's fine.
Okay. Any other comments? Okay.
I wanted to make sure I understood what you said, Chelsea. It's these three commissions that are meeting at different schedules. And if city council, if their meeting recommends it goes back to TEC,
I didn't answer the schedule part. I answered the procedure of whether you can ask TEC. I don't know, Eddie could better answer that, whether or not there would be adequate time to put it on an agenda for TEC in between now and the February meeting. Maybe the TEC, I think, meets between the first and second meeting in February of P&Z.
I have the meeting calendar here. The next meeting of TEC is on after February 10th or January 10th is February 14th.
So the next TEC meeting is the day after the next city council meeting, which would entertain your request. I don't think that there's adequate time between the 9th and the 10th to get it on that TEC agenda. And so that would push it to February if council says yes. And then we would have the responses from tomorrow's conversation with Kimley Horn and those additional pieces of information could then be provided in the February TEC meeting. And that would be the week before your second meeting in February.
Any comments? Member Garrard.
I don't want to throw a monkey wrench in this. Can we, it sounds like what would be best suited perhaps is to have recommended this be sent back to TEC and then let the scheduling go back, let City Council hear the recommendation to send this back to TEC. Then if myself or others are interested in hearing more specifics, perhaps the consultants can appear at the TEC and ferret out some of the questions of some of these species as opposed to here, and then have a recommendation come back to the Planning and Zoning Commission from the TEC after they reevaluate it. But it doesn't seem like the dates in the calendar is going to work unless either you would move this into the second meeting in February, I'd recommended the first, or move it into March, since I understand this has been kind of going on for a while, unless there's some neck-breaking reason to hurry it up, give everybody adequate time to respond, digest it, evaluate it, and certainly with the comment now about using native plant species and increasing it, that's a whole different issue.
So I think that the Roberts Rules is a two-step process where you could make a motion to amend your prior motion, which you'd all vote on that to decide to amend. Then you could do, if you all vote to amend the prior motion, then you could amend the prior motion in another motion to say you're continuing the table to after TEC hears it instead of a date certain. And at that point, we'll probably end up re-advertising the ordinance because of the amount of time. But that is just a outside projection that I'm thinking out loud about.
I certainly made the motion, so I thought I had enough time, but with all these other matters that really should be addressed, to be honest and fair with understanding this in the list and the species, I would certainly recommend or make a motion that I rescind my motion. And we'll start this whole thing over again in about 5 minutes.
Motion's made to rescind it.
Second.
Second. Any discussion? I don't think that's discussable, but roll call, please.
Member Faison?
Yes.
Member Perez?
Yes.
Member Moscoso?
Yes.
Member Garrard?
Yes.
Vice Chairman Aton?
Yes.
And Secretary Grant?
Yes.
Chairman Richardson?
Yes. Now, make a motion and get over it.
So if I frame this correctly, and if I'm incorrect, please help me frame it. The recommendation would be to have this list sent back to the TEC for further evaluation on the questions that I've posed, as well as to further examine the new subject matter of native plant species twofold. And following that, if re-advertisement's necessary, re-advertise this thing and bring it back after we've got a report from TEC and answers to the questions.
And somewhere in there, you said the word table.
I'm used to the word continuance to a date specific as opposed to tabling in generality. If tabling is acceptable, I can table it.
So tabling the item until such time as TEC has provided a recommendation, a second review?
Yes.
And
Is
then,
this-
and that's your recommendation to City Council for next week?
Yes.
Yes.
That's this motion.
That's my,
Is there a second?
I second the motion to
Okay.
table and
Okay.
to send back to TEC.
That's not discussable. Roll call, please.
Member Moscoso?
Yes.
Member Garrard?
yes.
Secretary Grant?
Yes.
Member Faison?
Yes.
Vice Chairman Aton?
Yes.
Member Perez?
Yes.
Chairman Richardson?
Yes. Okay. Eddie, you said you have a meeting tomorrow with the arborist or Kimley Horn?
It's the arborist on Kimley Horn's staff who prepared.
Okay. Do you have any questions for Eddie to ask them tomorrow when they're here?
I posed questions on a short list I provided. I think everybody acknowledged that they had that. And those are very specific. To be sincerely honest, I stayed away from the perennial planting schedule and some of the understory planting schedules, just because of time limitations. You're talking about going online and pulling up this data on species to species on 200 in a row. It's a little more challenging than I could do. I think the generalization is the arborist needs to look at some of these, and I certainly would appreciate it if they can provide some graphics that show illustrations as to where these planting species are in canopy trees specifically. I'm just going to let the native plants as the comment, some of the plants that are listed, and the whole list is really not a native plant list. That's what I said in the beginning. It's more an ornamental landscaping list. It's a wonderful palette of plants to choose from. I'm sure they're going to make a lovely entrance feature somewhere, but it's not what I think, my opinion, is what a plant species list should be more tailored for this area, not generalizations of trees. So I would like to see, I wouldn't mind attending it if that'd be appropriate, the TEC meeting, if that's appropriate. But that's just for what it's worth. My questions are on that list I gave you, but I'd hope you can see that the direction is there's more of an ornamental landscaping code written here than a native plant species, tree canopy species planting schedule.
Any other questions for Eddie to ask them tomorrow? Or whoever's going to ask them? Okay, you've heard our concerns
Any additional questions can be emailed into staff
in the morning.
or tonight, yes.
What time is our meeting tomorrow?
I think it's 9 a.m.
That means
So,
you're going to act pretty fast.
If I could summarize, so far I've heard that there's a concern of trees that are outside of the specific zone for Titusville.
Or, and that they're right at the range, we're at the edge of the range. It's
Okay.
like the Mason-Dixon line, one side's north and one side's south. But that again is my concern.
Turn your microphone on, please.
It's my concern that picking species that are on the edge of their range, with 99% of the range north or west, and this being right at the cusp is just not logical to me. I'm not an arborist, I'm not a degreed horticulturist, but it doesn't fit to what my experience shows to be a more suitable planting schedule.
Okay, so edge of range and the percentage of native to non-native species, correct?
Member Rogers.
That's what I was gonna say, yeah, and the percentage of
Okay.
native to non-native. I don't know why it's not higher.
Turn your mic on.
Microphone.
Oh, sorry.
Yes, I just don't know why that is, at least the ratio isn't higher than 50%. Why isn't it 66 or 75?
Anything else?
Any other questions? Any other questions? Okay. That next item is petitions and requests from the public present.
Thank you.
Okay. Semi-annual report from July 2023 to December 2023. You all have a copy of that. Any additions or corrections to make to that? It's pretty detailed.
Busy year.
Chairman, does the commission intend to have someone present the semi-annual report to city council, or would you like to present the report as written?
Most of them are presented to the council as written.
As written?
Yeah. Okay, all of you approve of the semi-annual report, or do you want more time to read it? Okay. You've got, I don't think you have to make a motion as long as we all consent. Okay. Next item is city staff report.
No report. Happy New Year.
You didn't answer, where have you been?
I've been here.
City attorney?
Happy New Year, no report.
Chairperson, I have a couple of things. I'm looking at this layout in the room, and the citizens are getting pushed back more and more. In fact, I was at the council meeting, and the space between the chairs do not meet ADA requirements. I think it's almost like you're pushing back the people too far, and I don't know if it's for the broadcast or what. Either that or you should take out and space these rows to meet ADA requirements. Because if anybody in the back row, or any of those rows, intends to get out and leave the meeting, they have to come forward. And I just think this needs to be looked at to meet ADA requirements. And something else I'm going to tell you about. Some of you have come in since I've been sitting here. I'm wearing shorts tonight. And it's not my choice. My brace broke about 2 months ago, and I had to get one rebuilt. And while the time I was walking on a broken brace, sounds like walking on broken glass, song from the 80s, I think, or the 90s. I have to relearn completely how to walk and turn around. So no matter how cold it gets, you may be seeing me wearing shorts for the next few meetings.
We'll bring a blanket.
And laugh.
To put over your head. And remember to have a report. Mr. Payson.
Well, glad to be back. As we know that I was out to visit my daughter in October, late October. She had my wonderful second grandson, Emiliano. However, once I returned, I don't know if you guys know or not, but my father passed away. And he began to decline on the night of the last meeting in December. And then we buried him on the 18th of December. So if I haven't been here, that was the reason. That's where I've been. I was over in Germany with my daughter for a few weeks, and then I was with my family for that occasion. So welcome to the new year. I'm here. There is no new me, but there is a new year.
And I think there's about 4 or 5 of you that come up for reappointment. The second meeting of the month of council. So if you haven't got a call from the city clerk, you should probably call the city clerk and tell them if you want to be reappointed. Any other members? And regardless of what you've read in the papers, that Form 6 does not apply to us. It applies only to elected officials. And you've read that different council people and commissioners are resigning all over the state. And that Form 6, as I recall, correct me if I'm wrong, Chelsea, means you got to disclose all bank accounts you have, all accounts. In fact, the dollar amount in the account and any personal items you have over $1,000. So it's quite, it's kind of like the Live Local Act. There'll be a change. And I agree with some of the comments I've heard from West Florida and South Florida. It's a privacy matter. The financial disclosure as we know it needed to be beefed up a bit, but they took it way too far. Okay, any other items?
Yeah, I do have a question. Have we had any more applications for the Live Local Act?
Good question.
We have one that has not been certified as a Live Local project, and nothing new since then.
Has the Bristol development been certified as a Live Local Act?
No, it has not.
Okay.
And I've got a question you just probably aren't aware of, but today I was traveling up Singleton Avenue, and I noticed that 3 lots they were preparing foundations for. And those 3 lots are in the pathway of Dunn Air Park. And I can remember, I think it was when I was on council in the 70s, that we bought that property for the airport authority to extend the runway. And we banned any houses going on those lots, as well as some on Luna Drive on the next block. And I'm wondering how that got through, how those building permits were issued.
Sure, if you send me an email, I can follow up for you.
I will. Any other discussion? Meeting is over at 7:02.